I consider it as just an important job, if not more, this farm job. As a kid, we would meet farmers, and I always looked up to them.
Why?
I just thought they were the most interesting and smart people I'd ever met. My farming started probably about 20 years ago. I'm originally from Australia. I had a term that I came up with was responsible family farming, in my opinion, for the food pyramid. Has been promulgated in a way that it's not allowed to be questioned. Doesn't mean you should eat meat and fat all day long. And
Of course, there's a limit to everything.
yeah, exactly. So, but is it as bad as we thought? Probably not. I may one day be proven that this is not the best way to do it, but it also may be proven one day that it actually is a fine way of doing it. If you're gonna do it, you just have to have an absolute passion for it. You have to love what you're doing, because there's gonna be days where it's super hard. And like I said, I really almost get more satisfaction out of it than even as 431 acres now.
Wow.
We started out with 30.
Wow.
And just by the grace of God, we were able to add land that was next to us over the last 26 years, actually. I think we're pretty much done, though, about adding land.
Okay.
So I have leased some additional land, about another 35 acres, where we kind of probably about, I'd say about 12 years ago or so, I stopped doing hay, and I started buying hay. I realized that I needed all the land to grow cows, and obviously in the grass-fed world, land is a limiting factor.
Right.
So that was that was an epiphany I had just one day, and I was looking at the land, and I was running out of land, and because I'm having to save fields for hay, and then to do feed in a grass-fed operation is expensive because you can't do grain.
Right.
So the grass-fed products are expensive, and I realized that I probably would do better, just put pen to paper, and do better by getting rid of the hay. And I started buying hay. Used some different hay producers over the years, but pretty much just using one or two hay producers now, and one who's a major producer for us, and it works out really well. He does everything like we want to do.
Okay.
And so we do a combination of baleage or haylage, however you want to. That's, you can see the
Yeah.
plastic wrap.
Yeah.
And then we have our dry bales, and it's a combination of different grasses. Our baleage tends to be ryegrass,
Okay.
so I buy it in the spring, late spring, and then in the summer we start getting our dry bales,
Okay.
as you can see.
Yeah.
And this is most of it's a Bahia type
Okay.
dry bales.
Okay.
But occasionally do dry bales in the ryegrass as well. What's really kind of interesting about that time, I really wanted to get away from tilling
Okay.
and go no-till. And I called up a place where I would buy equipment, told them I wanted to sell or trade in my hay equipment. And it turned out that it was an exact, I mean, I remember like it was yesterday, he said, you won't believe this, but it's down to the penny, it's exactly an equal trade for a seed drill. So, and those are expensive.
Yes, they are.
So I basically traded my hay equipment for a seed drill and haven't looked back.
Very cool.
And you just have to do a lot of planning with the hay if you're going to buy it, and be aggressive and not just wait. So I start buying early.
Okay.
And I keep a close count on what I need.
Okay.
And that count is something that is a formula I've just kind of developed over the years.
Right.
Trying to look at the weight of the cows and do the 2.5% dry matter. I've tried that, and you could actually go pretty broke doing it that way.
Yeah. So so you just use your best guess?
You're right.
With
So
your
I look at my
experience?
numbers usually right before we start putting hay out. We start putting hay out usually around November, maybe a smattering in late October, and I look at the count of cows, see how many cows I had the year before, and how much hay I used, and then basically that ends up being a pretty good way of figuring out what I'll need for the. And we look at body conditions all the time. I've always told my kids, kind of beat into them as far as all the time telling them. I really think the best way to determine the quality of your pastures is to look at your cattle.
Absolutely.
And so if the body conditions are going down, it's either it's a combination of the pasture not being good enough, or the cows being overstocked.
Yeah.
And or you're keeping them overstocked for too long.
Yeah.
And
by overstocked, you mean out in the pasture too long?
Out in the pasture too long, there's not enough pasture left for them.
Yeah.
And I know I don't actually do the mob grazing. I found that the best way for us is to just divide up all the pastures into a certain amount of acreage and put a certain amount of cows on it. The number of head is usually around 48 or 50 in an area of about 25 acres.
Okay.
So it's usually 2 to 1 or so.
How long do you leave them in there for?
I just look at the pastures. And
Okay.
I don't have a set formula. I just look at the pastures, look at their body conditions, and let them tell me. The farm is broken up into roughly 20, 25 acre areas.
Okay.
Some of them are right over here. This is actually where the market cows usually are.
Okay.
So this is broken up a little bit more tight. We've designed the farm to be able to easily manage moving the cattle into the catch pen, which is right there, and sort them out. There's a sorting area right in there. This is a design that we've developed over the last several years. I'm where I wanted to be.
Okay.
Now. It took me close to 20 years to get to this point.
Wow.
I'm very satisfied with what we have now, because it allows just 1 or 2 people to be able to get the cattle into the sorting area and to sort them out and load them to take to market.
Very cool.
And we do that every 2 weeks.
How many are you
And
taking every 2 weeks?
Usually 4, but it can be as high as 6. And then that begins. So my job is to get them to that point.
Yep.
And Katie actually usually hauls the cattle to the market, and then
Very cool.
that allows her to then talk to the processors, which is USDA, and go over the plans for those cattle. And she's constantly in communication. But I think it's important, though, to be able to have the farm set up in a way where you can limit the amount of employees. And I work it full-time on the weekends as far as being the farm hand.
Because you have an off-farm job.
That's right. And then I have either call him a head rancher or assistant manager that is here Monday through Friday. But I do all the plans for the farm, and I'm in constant communication with him. And every week a list is developed by me, usually on Sunday, and send it out, and it goes to Katie and him.
Gotcha.
And usually every day we're communicating.
Very cool.
And all the holidays and everything is me covering. It's gotten a little bit harder with the kids being gone now.
Yeah, yeah.
But I love it, and it's a passion.
Awesome. Are you guys organic certified,
we are
or
not
just
organic certified?
organic practices?
Well, I would say 90%.
Okay.
But I had a term that I came up with, was responsible family farming. And the reason I came up with that is because I think technology is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Do the organic farmers drive a car? I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
That's fossil fuels.
Right.
Fossil fuels aren't necessarily a bad thing either.
Right.
And so I think using things wisely and using them judiciously
Yeah.
is good. But so there's things like I don't want to do unless I absolutely have to, and which, like, give antibiotics.
Right.
We don't give antibiotics. And
Not as a broad spectrum anyway.
We don't. I think there's actually one animal on this farm right now out of the 230 or so that are here right now that are had got an antibiotic, and I just darted it. Matthew, who's here during the week, darted this animal with an antibiotic just a couple days ago. Okay. That's the only one right now.
It just what was wrong? Abscess or something?
It's looks like a pneumonia.
Ooh.
Yeah,
okay.
It was starting, and we caught it, we hope, early.
Okay.
So no broad spraying of herbicides, no broad spraying of pesticides. Now, there are certain plants that we might kill with a herbicide, such as Perillo mint, which is a problem around here. It's a poison to cattle, and it smells like mint, actually.
Okay.
And it's usually around oak trees or shady areas. And when it becomes a problem is when the grass starts going dormant. Okay. They're not quite dormant yet, and the cattle are looking for something to eat. They eat those, and that can be poisonous. Okay. So we will spray something like that. So that's what I mean about responsible family farming. And the cattle are basically their manure and urine is what's
adding to the pastures.
Right.
So we're not cutting hay off. We're not taking those nutrients off the ground. So this is year after year. And that's the other reason I wanted to not do hay on here, because I wanted to be able to not take away.
Yeah.
I wanted to keep trying to add. So even though it's not in, the small paddocks, the mob grazing and moving 2 to 3 times a day, we are, I believe, over time getting the soil biome where it needs to be at.
Yeah.
And that's the other reason I don't want to do broad spraying, because I don't want to destroy that biome that we have now been spending close to 20 years developing.
Now, and I mean, if you're not doing hay, that means that you probably aren't putting as much tractor compaction on your fields.
That's right.
You're drilling seed, but you're doing that once a year. Maybe twice.
Exactly. We're doing it just once a year.
Yeah.
We're planting ryegrass. I mainly do 100% ryegrass.
Okay.
In certain fields. If most of the time we have a bush hog, like a one that we might come in behind after we move a herd, but most of the time we don't have to do that. If the field is pretty even from the cattle, which most of the time it is, we don't even need to come behind with a bush hog. And so that would be something that is different from the intensive grazing. But like I said, most of the time we don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Most of the fields you're seeing here have not been bush hogged.
You stopped cutting hay 20 years ago.
Probably 12 or so.
12 years ago,
Yeah.
sorry. So before that, you were cutting hay. How long have you been on this farm, including the first 30 acres? How long have you been farming or ranching?
So that's what makes me different, which is interesting. I was watching one of your other videos, was somebody who did not grow up farming. I didn't grow up farming.
Okay.
My farming started probably about 20 years ago. I'm originally from Australia. We immigrated over here, and I've been in the South or Southeast for about 4 decades. My father was a doctor. I'm actually an orthopedic surgeon.
What? You hid your day job.
That's
You
right.
buried the lead on that
That's
one.
right.
You sure did.
And so it is I consider it as just an important job, if not more, this farm job.
Yeah.
And so this is pretty much all I do is fix bones and
Fix guts.
that's right. Exactly.
Very cool.
My dad always had this love of farming.
Okay.
And as a kid, we would meet farmers, and I always looked up to them.
Why?
I just thought they were the most interesting and smart people I'd ever met. They're basically doing the most important thing that you can do, I think, is supplying food. Food is medicine. And I think we're learning that more and more today.
As a doctor, because I think sometimes there's a big pull between Western and Eastern medicine, ideologies anyway.
Right.
As a doctor yourself, how do you feel that pull on your farm?
So that is a great question, and that's what really motivates me, is more and more we're learning that food is important to health and the way you eat. And which is why I wanted to do grass-fed beef. Starting out a while back, not knowing anything, and being one of the first grass-fed producers around here in the deep South, as far as from Mississippi for sure, it was very difficult to learn how to do it.
Why?
Because my education was through reading, but there's nothing like being shown how to do something.
Especially when you don't come from it.
That's
like,
when you don't come from
I
it.
talk a lot about how when my husband and I farmed, I am a 6th generation farmer.
Wow.
He is from the town.
Yeah.
Right? Not a city, but town. And we'd be moving cattle, and I'm like, why are you doing that? She's obviously going this way. And he's like, how am I supposed to know that? I'm like, you just know. I don't know. He's like, no, Olivia, I don't know. So that's a really good point you bring up, because you don't have that.
I had to learn that. It's not something innate. You have to learn.
And you can't go to a lecture and learn it.
can't.
You can't get a PhD in farming.
No, you can't.
How do you do that?
One mistake after another, and I guess I was just naive enough to think I could do it, and I ended up doing it. And it is the best compliment I get is when other farmers come visit. Yeah. And they're as shocked as you are right now that I wasn't from a multi-generation farming
No wonder
family.
you buried the lead.
Yeah. Most of the people don't know that I'm an orthopedic surgeon. In fact, the best compliment I get is when somebody finds out that I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and they thought, wait a minute, I thought he was a cattle rancher.
And you're like, that's right.
That's right.
I'm a cattle rancher first, doctor second.
That's how I really, I'm at that point now where I almost feel like that.
That's awesome.
And so I made tons of mistakes. You know, I helped the extension agency through Mississippi State. Those folks were great.
Yeah.
I think initially they probably thought I was crazy. And well, first of all, starting to try to do this from no background,
Yeah.
and then doing grass-fed beef, which nobody around here was doing.
Why
And-
is that?
Well, I'll tell you a story. When we first got into a grocery store, it took me like 2 years to get an interview with the CEO of the grocery store because they just didn't want to talk to me. And then finally I met somebody who was a friend, and they got me in.
Yeah.
And they asked me, grass-fed beef. What's that?
When was that?
It was early 2000s, I guess.
Wow.
Well, I mean, after Katrina, probably about 2007. It wasn't perhaps that they didn't know exactly. They'd heard of grass-fed beef, but they weren't really sure, like, what does grass-fed beef mean?
Right.
And so I had to explain to them what I was doing. And that shows you that even though it is such a known product to many people, really a lot of people don't know
Yeah.
wherever you're in the country, don't know what grass-fed beef means. Well, we got into a grocery store, and that was kind of the beginning of us getting known. Now we're completely retail. We don't do any wholesale. We're not in restaurants anymore. We actually pulled out of our last restaurant.
Why did you pull out of wholesale?
It's too hard to make money. If you can sell your product retail, this is not something that is worthwhile if you can't get people to eat it. And the way you get people to eat it is be able to stay in business. If you can't stay in business, what's the point? That's a whole other topic that I could talk a long time about. But staying in business is important. And when we're doing wholesale prices for the grocery stores or for the restaurants, that's money that is being lost by the farm. We're fortunate enough that we've become well known enough to be able to do the retail. But it's not too long that we've been 100% retail. It's only in the last few months. So
Wow.
we pulled out of the grocery store, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago. Okay. And then the last restaurant just maybe 6 months ago.
You started out wholesale and in restaurants about 20 years ago. So
Yeah,
you were
right after Katrina, about 2007 or so, I
Okay.
would say. And it was wholesale plus direct marketing from the farm. And it wasn't until that Katie got us into the farmers markets that we really started kind of taking off. Farmers markets are labor intensive, as you know,
Yeah.
and you have to get ready for them. But Katie is a full-time on the farm. She's runs the financial side of it and does all the orders. We don't do like on the internet site, we don't do a cart because, as you know, family farms, the inventory goes up and down. And it's very frustrating for customers when they say sold out,
Yeah.
sold out, sold out. If you go to any of those sites,
Yeah.
you'll see sold out, sold
Yeah.
out, sold out. So we want the customer to call us. We want to do it the way our grandparents did it, and that is to talk to us.
Yeah.
And so she can explain to them, because most of the time when you're buying from a farm, you might be new at it.
Yeah.
And you're like yourself, not a sixth generation farmer. They
Yeah.
don't know. Also the cuts of the beef. Katie talks to customers and finds out what they like, what they might end up liking, and she gives them a lot of good advice, and that's how we form a relationship with our customers.
That feels really labor intensive.
It is. She's on the phone from morning until night intermittently with customers, and whether it's with customers, whether it's with the processing plant, whether it's with vendors that we're buying from certain things for the farm. Most of the time that would be me doing that, but she does it as well. But farming is labor intensive, and the only way to make it work is for it to be labor intensive.
To kind of steer into the skid a little. And
Right. So if I didn't do the farming myself, I wouldn't know what's going on here.
Yeah.
I don't know how anybody runs a farm without being on the farm.
I'm really curious as to what your epiphany was. You had cattle on pasture. You were cutting hay off. You stopped cutting hay and started drilling. What was your epiphany? How did it come to you that you would rather have higher stocking rates and buy hay versus trying to pull it off yourself?
We started actually selling more cattle, and the customer base started increasing, and I didn't have we're 431 acres now, but we weren't at that point.
Okay.
I think we were about half of that. So a lot of those fields had to be maintained for for the hay.
So you mean like spreading fertilizer, spraying?
Right.
Okay.
And I was looking at my cattle and thinking, this is crazy. I have all this ground here, and I can't move them in there to eat and to graze. When I realized I can improve this operation by expanding the pastures and not take the stress of the hay. The hay is a stressful endeavor for the soil.
The mechanical removal.
Yeah. And it's not great for the soil biome. I could improve that by just getting rid of it.
Yeah.
And then working with a hay producer. And it really worked out to be a great thing for us.
Awesome. So you've seen beneficial results on your field since then?
100%. It has been, and the pastures have improved substantially. The weight gains of my cattle have improved. Even though it's not mob grazing or intensive grazing, and we're not moving cattle 2 to 3 times a day, it still is improving the soil. 50 head per 25 acres. You keep them on there for a couple weeks, and then you move them. And the way the farm is set up is have these different paddocks, which are about 25 acres, and you move from one to the other, and just keep moving them around. And
can we elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah.
So in this organic push, regenerative model push, a lot of people, that push is on using electric fencing, moving every single day, if not multiple times a day. You're like, that just doesn't work for us. When you're researching, I want to be a farmer, I want to grow good food, I want grass-fed cows, I'm sure the Greg Judy model came up a lot. How did you decide, like, that's not for me, it's not going to work well?
I felt like it was going to be labor intensive as far as finding the person to be able to do that, because I had to go to work Monday through Friday, and
you probably have on-call hours too, don't you?
I did.
At that time?
Exactly.
Okay.
And I felt like that is obviously a very good model, and it is very good for the soil, but it's not the only model.
Yeah.
And one thing have a science background, I think we have to be careful about what's science and what's religion. And sometimes scientific methods become religion, and that's no longer science.
That's a good point.
Doing it this way doesn't mean it doesn't work. It may not be as intensive, but over the years it does work, because that whole rotational model was based on herds in the wild moving, being compacted and moving. But there are many days where I come out here, and particularly in the summer months, that I see my herds compacted, and it's really interesting to me. So do we really need to be doing this multiple moves a day with small pastures?
Or
my
at
cattle,
least is it that important?
Is it required?
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it required? I don't think so. So if you go look through my pastures, you'll see they may not eat the weeds down to the ground, but they're eating the weed. And most of the time, like I said, I might come in behind them after they finish a field with a bush hog, but most of the time I don't have to.
Right.
Because they've eaten it pretty much all down. So they didn't do it in a day, but they've done it over 2 weeks.
Right.
Or like I said, I decide to move them based on body conditions and pasture. And that's something that even though I'm full-time in the weekends, I do go through the pastures during the week as well. And a lot of my time is spent just walking the pastures. I'll ride my horse through the pastures, and I'll look at them, I'll walk through them, I'll do whatever I need to do.
I think that maybe what you just said is probably the biggest foundational piece of any farm, is that you still take time to look at your pastures.
Right.
You maybe you're not doing it like, your neighbor over here or your neighbor over there.
Right.
One's doing managed intensive grazing and one's doing just open grazing.
Right.
But you're still looking at your pastures every chance you can.
Every chance I can, which is multiple times a week.
Yeah.
And when I get a chance to just get on my horse, which is the best way to look at a pasture.
Why do you say that?
Well, you have just the right height to look down, and you can navigate through anything pretty much on a horse.
Yeah.
And
That's a good point. Instead of being like completely slumped over and like
Right.
looking
Yes.
down, you can kind of stand up and
It's a
still
great
look
view.
straight down.
It's a great view. And I can get through a lot of pasture
Yeah.
on a horse. And we do use a horse to move cattle every now and then. You know, most
Okay.
of the time they will move very easily.
Yeah.
On the usually when they've been in a field through the winter, that's at the end of the winter. It's sometimes difficult to move them, but most of the time it isn't. But when it does become somewhat difficult, we can get on a horse and do that. So,
Nice.
yeah, that's one of the best feelings there is just be on a horse going through your pastures.
Yeah.
You feel like you're part of the earth, really.
That's a good point because
Yeah.
you feel it. I mean, you
Right.
feel the
You-
horse hitting
You
the
do,
ground.
and it's something I never get sick of. I never get sick of looking at the cattle. I never get sick of moving the cattle. But the proof is in the pudding. The pastures have significantly improved the way I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And it takes enough time during the day just to do it the way we're doing it. So if you added the having to move the hot wire,
Mm-hmm.
you know, around the fields, it'd be hard to get a lot of what we need to get done here.
Right.
And I'm sure that statement would be disagreed with by a lot of people who are doing it, but
I did it. We farmed that way.
yeah,
I mean, we moved our cows every single day,
Uh-huh.
our chickens every single day, pigs every,
Yeah.
once a week or so. And I don't disagree with you.
yeah,
When you've got, we had 13 calves on pasture doing
Yeah,
that.
right.
You know, this is, would you say 250?
yeah. We get up to we'll get up to about 260. We were at 360, which was too many, and
Okay.
and we were able to decrease our inventory by getting out of the wholesale. We're
Okay.
actually making we're making it now with less cattle and doing all retail,
See.
less overhead,
Yeah.
and making more of a profit.
Well, because I imagine with your wholesale accounts, you had to have so many rumps
Oh yeah,
and so many New Yorks, and,
Right.
and you just can't make a cow that's all
right. And we had to
fillets.
sell the ground beef very inexpensively.
Exactly, because nobody,
And,
yeah,
and it was going to put us under
right.
with COVID. So my whole family was here, and we were all living together, and everybody was working on the farm, going to farmers markets, and it allowed me to have this time away from medicine and just to be on the farm all the time. And I was able to look at the strengths and weaknesses of what we were doing. Where are we going to be able to survive the farm?
Okay.
You know, people say, yo, he's an orthopedic surgeon, he can just pay for everything. What we're doing here, what I make, won't pay for this. This will put you under in a split second. The amount of money you have to put into it to get out of it, it's risky. And that's like any farming. And I'm fortunate I have another job that I can put money into it, but we wouldn't be doing this if it didn't have a chance of making money, because it has to.
Yeah.
Because you can't. What happens when I stop my regular work?
Right.
I don't want to stop doing this, so I want to make it work.
Right.
So that's the thing. In the COVID time, I was in the fields every day. Like I said, I was riding my horse all the time, and I was here with people working on the farm, including my kids. We reconfigured the whole farm into what I consider was my dream design, which was to make the paddocks just like I wanted, to get the fences repaired and built like I wanted, and to do a lot of reading as well. And during that time, I'd say is because of the COVID time is the reason why the farm has moved in the direction it has and going completely retail and really focusing on the consumer.
So you were able to take that downtime and kind of look at things a little more closely and realize that you could have better profitability and maybe a little less riskiness by going retail
That's right.
instead of wholesale.
That's right.
Very cool.
But then when we were rebuilding the farm, it was also the most expensive time to rebuild because
Okay.
everything went up.
So that's when you put up all the fencing and stuff?
It is.
Wow. So what did you have before that?
We
then?
had fences that were falling apart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was very difficult because it was multiple nights. I remember one night, my son during COVID, there was a tropical storm. Cows got out, fences were down. Cows got out into the more populated area over that way. So it was about 11 o'clock at night, and we're in the pitch black, in a tropical storm, rounding up cattle
Oh my
around
gosh.
houses, trying
Don't
to
mind me.
trying to put fences back up somewhat, and that's a night that my oldest son will never forget.
That's one of those nights that tests you.
Yeah,
That you're like, is this what I really want to do with my life?
exactly. And
Yeah.
so that which comes down to the point that if you're going to do this, you got to have a passion for it.
Yeah.
You got to really want to do this.
Yeah.
And I do.
So how did the bug bite you to become a farmer? What happened?
So, like I said, my dad had a lot of influence on me. He loved farmers and farming, and he always said he wished he had become a farmer. And I always remembered that. And, it's kind of funny. As a little kid, I always wanted to be a cowboy as well. We didn't have horses.
Yeah.
So now I'm a cowboy and now I'm a farmer. But as I got into medicine, I realized the importance of food and how it is important to know where your food is from and how it's produced. And so that just kind of fed into the whole concept of wanting to farm. And so when we found this 30-acre place here in Stone County, Mississippi, and that's when it really started. But it was a much smaller operation at that time. We had horses and we planted trees. But what got me into cattle farming was Katrina. We had more land at that time, and we had a lot of trees. And I was really focused on raising some horses, which it's not really the type of farming I wanted to do, but we were doing the trees and the horses. Always thought about cattle, and I had a friend of mine that got me, I was a cattle farmer that would talk to me about it all the time.
Okay.
And so Katrina nearly destroyed the whole place. It destroyed our tree farm, destroyed buildings. It was a 2-year recovery after that. It was a whole family was here during it. And it was another time when the whole family was together and experienced something.
Yeah.
So I'd say Katrina and COVID were 2 events on the farm. So I came out of the house and saw all the destruction. Beautiful sunny day like it is after every hurricane, and made a phone call and talked to my buddy, and that's when we started buying commercial cows. So I did commercial cattle for 2 years, and I realized that the whole process with the feedlots, I'm not down in the feedlots, it's a whole other way of raising beef, and I got to be very careful about that, because I'm not going to say that is not an important way to raise beef. I'm just saying I didn't want to do it that way after learning the business.
Yeah.
That I wanted to try to focus on perhaps something that I thought was more in line with a product that I could say is perhaps has a more beneficial health profile, and that's how I researched grass-fed beef and got out of the commercial cattle business, and then bought my first herd. So we got up to about 168 mama cows, and that was really labor intensive. I was working a lot more, taking care of the mama cows and the calves, and having to wean them and so forth. But as the years went on, other people started getting interested in what we were doing. So I've developed relationships with other farmers who have switched to grass-fed, and I buy the calves from them now. These 8 mama cows are pretty much just the last of. I basically buy mainly steers. Occasionally we'll get a heifer if a farmer really wants me to buy it, but I really try not to buy heifers anymore. I don't have any problems with heifers as beef. It's just a lower carcass weight, but still just as good. But we buy mainly steers. I basically buy them the same day they're weaned. We bring them back to the catch pen. I will vaccinate and worm them. That's usually the only time I'm going to have to vaccinate and worm. Do it one time.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about the responsible family farming. I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
It's technology.
Yeah.
I don't want my cows to be sick. Now, if they do get sick and they need an antibiotic, they're going to get it. But like I said, all the cattle that are on this farm right now, there's only one that had an antibiotic. And they get cold.
So if they get sick, they're gone anyway.
I won't necessarily sell them right away, but a lot of times I will sell them. They'll, they can go into my freezer.
Where do you sell them to?
So the individuals who call the farm.
Okay.
Oh, you mean the ones with antibiotics?
Yeah.
Oh, I just take them to the stockyard.
Okay.
We really, my wife and I have talked about
letting a customer know, do you want a cheaper, a discounted beef? She's totally against that though. She says, it's no antibiotics, no hormones, no grain, and so we're sticking to that. If anybody were to eat one of them, it would probably be us. But most of the time, I'll end up selling them.
Which, and obviously, it's probably for the sake of saying, because this is the internet, that you're waiting past the withdrawal period.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not eating the animal right after
Right.
they've been injected.
That's right.
With it. I mean, and it's probably well past
Yes.
the withdrawal period. So I think that's worth saying. So you take the stance of no antibiotics ever, and that's
right.
what you sell as a product.
That's right.
Why is that?
I can think a lot of my customers demand it, even though I don't necessarily, as a doctor, agree with that.
Yeah.
I think once it's out of the system, it's out of the system.
Yeah.
But it's too much of a question mark in the customer when they call. They don't want grain, they don't want antibiotics, they don't want hormones. And I just say, we don't do any of that.
Yeah.
And so we keep it that way. And it's harder.
Is that like maybe like a break in, and not saying it's necessarily your responsibility per se, but do you think that that's more of a break in the education piece of it, that the customer maybe isn't aware of how the antibiotics are used?
Great point, which is why I am no longer certified with American. I like the American Grass-Fed Association. We used to be in it, and all of the certification groups, by and large, are really wonderful organizations, do great work. But it's not a good fit for me anymore. I tell the customers to come see what I'm doing. Like you just showed up. I didn't prepare anything differently for you,
Right.
and that's what I do with the customers. And I give tours all the time. But the certification agencies groups have that as one of their antibiotics. You can't give them. You're cold. That is now learned by the public,
Yeah.
and the public thinks that that's the way it should be, even though I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
It's too much of a mountain for me to climb with the customer.
I mean, you're only one man.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I can tell them, show them literature and say it's out of the system, it's okay, don't worry about it. But there's always that question mark in their mind, well, maybe he is giving grain then, or maybe he is giving a hormone.
Right.
And so I just get rid of that. And that's why we're just no hormones, no antibiotics, no grain. And the other thing too is I have to pay extra money for the certification.
Yeah.
And in Mississippi, you have to be able to keep your prices down. We're not New York City grass-fed beef, which can be over $10 a pound for ground
Yeah.
beef. We're not that price. So that's another expense. So we're constantly looking at ways to keep the price down. And we hate raising our prices. But, unfortunately, in this market, we've had to. And with the economy. The other thing, too, is with the certification groups, they are very particular on some of the type of feed, which I don't necessarily agree with. Like, if I were to go non-GMO on all my feed, that price would be exorbitant.
How is non-GMO if they're grass-fed? Because the non-GMO is on like grain-fed. You're not able to be non-GMO. What are you feeding that's a GMO?
So we'll supplement with alfalfa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
So
Okay.
that's a legume.
Yeah.
But the grass-fed world, alfalfa is okay, but it's a legume. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's still grass-fed. And so so there's other legumes too, a peanut hull, a soy hull.
Yeah.
We're not feeding the bean, we're not feeding the peanut, we're feeding the fiber, it's a filler.
Mm-hmm.
But most of what we feed is alfalfa. To do non-GMO on alfalfa or a soy hull or a peanut hull is really expensive.
Yeah.
Our feed, when I didn't add just a hull to my alfalfa, the price got up at 1 month was $25,000 for feed in the winter.
Dang.
On an operation with 360 head. That's what I'm saying. You can have another job, but if you're not doing this right,
Yeah.
and then you're adding extra costs that the consumer doesn't really see or care a lot about, then that's another difficulty of getting the beef to market at an affordable price, but whereby the farmer can still make a profit.
That brings up another point, one that you mentioned earlier about walking the line between religion and science. As a doctor, as a farmer, and as a business owner, how do you walk that line out here between a regimented scientific equation and putting your faith into the grass is telling me what it needs, kind
So,
of thing.
so where my radar goes up is when I hear somebody say, you have to do it this way. This is the only way to really do it. This is the only regenerative method that is appropriate. That's when that is done, said, and presented that way. When I'm not saying it is, but you do talk to farmers where it is presented that way.
Yeah.
And that's when it becomes a religion. There's so many things we're doing that have been proven not to be accurate in
Like what?
retrospect. For example, in nutrition, the food pyramid come from. Eating of grain is the healthy thing to do, and fat and saturated fats and meat should be eliminated. That is been taught, and it was not based on good science for decades.
General Mills sponsored.
And you know, and it started with a guy named Ansel Keys.
Yeah.
And that was taught in nursing schools, medical schools, still is today. And if you say that saturated fats and meat are maybe healthy, you're a heretic. But why? Because the science really has not proven that to be wrong. It's just that the science, which was shoddy, in my opinion, for the food pyramid, has been promulgated in a way that it's not allowed to be questioned. Anytime there's something that you're not allowed to question is a red flag, should be for any scientist.
Which, and isn't the scientific method based on prove me not true?
Exactly.
Not prove me true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, this is, exactly. You come up with a hypothesis, and it's the job of the scientist to prove that hypothesis is correct. It's not that it's correct and you prove me wrong. It's you have to try to prove it incorrect.
Yeah.
And that's not what has happened, for example, with the food pyramid. And I think now more and more people are starting to realize that the science had been bad. Doesn't mean you should eat meat and fat all day long. And
of course, there's a limit to everything.
yeah, exactly. So, but is it as bad as we thought? Probably not. Am I going to be proven one day that not moving my cattle 3 times a day and putting 50 head in 25 acres for 2 weeks is not as productive? I may one day be proven that this is not the best way to do it, but it also may be proven one day that it actually is a fine way of doing it.
But I think that in your world, right this second, it's what works best for you.
Exactly.
You have good conditioned cattle.
Yep.
You have a grand product at the end. And you're happy.
Exactly.
And your farm chores are taken care of. There's no injuries. Nobody's sick. Nobody's hurt.
That's right.
So I totally agree with you on that it doesn't have to be a certified equation. When we were farming, people would ask us all the time, because we documented it with our YouTube channel. Well, how many cows, exactly how big is your area? And I'm like, I don't measure.
Yeah.
I just know what they eat in a day, give or take some. And you have to trial and error it for yourself.
Right.
Would you say, and I think this is a wonderful question to ask you, given your education, do you think that today's education system focuses too much on analytics, and that maybe we've kind of forgotten that it's okay to be fluid?
100%. I always talk to my patients that there's the art of medicine. You can't teach experience. And experience, me making 1,000 mistakes a year when I first started farming and look like probably a total idiot to other farmers, was an experience that was so important, and you can't teach that. And so there are certain things where the science won't give you a hard answer, and you just have to listen to your gut, listen to your experience, and make a decision. And that's what I do with these cattle. I mean, when my eyes looking at these cattle today are completely different than the eyes that were looking at these cattle 20 years ago. That's how I'm better at it. I'm better at looking at them and determining when they need to be moved, what's the quality of the pasture based on how the cattle look. And of course you have to also look at the pasture. And I'm better at that. But there's not a device I can throw into the grass and it tells me what to do. And I think that's the art of farming. And I think that's just, I think perhaps only farmers kind of understand that.
You're not against technology, and with ChatGPT and AI coming up the way it is, where you can just type in how do I farm, where do you think farming fits into the new technology that's coming out? And I'm gonna brace that with we probably ask people this every 10 years as something new and big and wild comes out. But what do you think?
I think you have to look backwards to move forward. I think you have to look at your grandparents and see what they were doing, instead of thinking that you're right because you're modern and new. And I think what I'm doing here is no different than what cattle farmers were doing prior to 1950. And it's just because it's so different now, it has a term called grass-fed. It is important to understand that technology is a good thing, but technology can be overused. When antibiotics came around and then they were started to be injected into every calf that was born, a lot of farmers would do that in days past because they thought it was the right thing to do, because why not try to beat the bacteria before it beats you?
Right.
But that was not a good thing, obviously. It created resistance. So technology overused or incorrectly used can be very dangerous. You asked me about, Eastern, Western medicine. I'm into the holistic side of medicine. I don't think the two should be divorced. I think they should be taught together. And I think food is, in a way, is part of that Eastern side of medicine, that the food is really important. I started eating a higher percentage of fat and meat and got away from anything processed. I had been on a reflux medicine for 25 years.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Ouch.
I'm off of it now.
Good for you.
And that's an example of a holistic type of medicine, because we now know there's a lot more research on anti-inflammatory diets. And that's a perfect example of how what you eat is perhaps some of the best medicine there is. And that's what really motivates me as a farmer, is to be able to make a product that is healthy for the consumer and that they can trust. We have cancer patients coming to our farm and the farmers markets. They get the bones, they eat the marrow, and they trust us because they see what we're doing. And hearing the testimonials of customers, like I just gave for myself, are just amazing, and it makes you feel really good.
So you're always finding ways to improve. You're
right.
always trying to find the next thing that's going to help keep you going forward.
Right.
What is next for you? You've been doing cattle for 20 years.
Close to, yeah.
Yeah. Do you see yourself adding any other form of livestock, or are you just going to stick with cattle? What's next for you?
Well, I always have this voice, which is my wife.
This one little voice that I kind of married a few years ago.
Yes, right. And she's, every time I talk about the Australian side of me, wants to do sheep.
Okay.
Because it's a perfect match for the cattle.
It,
I get slammed on that every time I bring it up. But
I just always laugh because everybody that I've talked to about sheep, they're like, I don't know, they try to die every single day.
Yeah, and I've heard that, and I'm sure that it would frustrate me. But I think we're pretty much just going to try to be as good as we can at cattle.
Yeah.
And we'll grow as the market grows. But I think if we run out of land, and that's what my wife is afraid of as well, as we get too big.
Yeah.
It gets a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
We'd have to lease land. I'm not going to keep buying land.
So you'd get bigger? If you were asked to get bigger, you would get bigger?
I think I would.
Okay.
Because we have grown steadily.
And you see a demand for it?
I do. Since we've really marketed north of here in Jackson, that has really improved our business. But every week it seems like we're getting new customers. The most important thing to do is, if you're going to grow, is not necessarily buy more land, make your pastures better so they're higher quality.
Yeah.
And they're growing those calves.
How long does it take you to finish out a calf? Because you said you get them the day that they weaned.
Right.
So that's about what, 6 to 8 months?
I try not to take a 6-month-old because most of the time they're harder to keep healthy.
Okay.
And so usually 7 to 9 months.
Okay.
But again, it depends on their weight. It could
Okay.
be, if it's 6 months big, then I might take it.
Okay.
But the sweet spot's probably, if everyone could be 28, 29, 30 months, that's kind of a sweet spot for us with grass-fed. So we try to, instead of where we used to buy them all around the same time in the summer, early summer to fall. We're now buying them in groups throughout the year.
So is that all that you drill is ryegrass?
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
add. I used to add oats. I just have found that just doing the ryegrass works really well
Okay.
for us.
And you said you seed once a year.
Once a year.
How many times do they hit the same paddock each year?
We'll probably. That's a good question. I'd say about 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty good for a 25-acre spot.
We have we feed in the winter, so we
Okay.
will do the alfalfa mixture in these concrete troughs.
I like those. Those are nice.
This was part of the COVID plan when we did
Okay.
this, and so we have a automatic feeder that we pull on a trailer behind the RTV, like one of these, and
With
just
it's auger fed.
auger fed,
Nice.
and we'll just put it right into these troughs. These concrete water troughs, they're the bomb,
Yeah.
and that was also part of the COVID plan.
Do they freeze?
They do. We don't get a lot of hard freezes,
Right.
but they do freeze just on the top. And you
Okay.
it's not
The
a big
cows
deal.
can freeze,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
we'll come around with that axe and break them. That's not very often. though.
Yeah.
And which I have a lot of respect for the northern farmers.
Oh, somebody's excited. They're all running.
So they think they're being fed. They love the alfalfa. They really do. But these are, I got 4 new ones just a couple days ago.
Okay.
And they're probably in here walking around, obviously weaning.
Yeah, a
process
little
of weaning.
skittish.
But you can see how it's black baldies, red baldies. We try to have ponds in most of the fields,
Okay.
and just in case our water system goes down. But
And it's
that-
probably so hot in the summer. It's like going
they
really
love
cool.
it. They love it, yeah. So these are just, some of these have been here a couple months. Some of them just a few days.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think it was October actually. So November, December. Yeah, a couple. So those are donkeys. and-
Those are giant donkeys.
Yeah.
Jeez, I thought for sure that was a mule.
Yeah. Yeah. So those keep the coyotes away.
Okay, so you have a hard time with coyotes around here.
Right. We actually they wreak havoc,
Really?
and so the donkeys actually will keep them out. And old farmers taught me that when I first started doing this.
What'd you
We had-
think
we
when
had
they
a
told you
couple-
that?
I mean, I've had other people say, "Oh, that's an old wives' tale," but I had calves die, and I have not had calves die. And you can hear them at night.
Yeah.
You can hear the coyotes too, and you can hear the donkeys when they're near them too, and it's really something else.
Are they just like yelling at them, or what do they do?
Well, they'll kick them. They're going, they're really loud, and
Yeah.
but they will beat to death a coyote.
Wow.
Or at least injure them, get them out of here.
Yeah, scare them enough to make them go away.
And I have watched these donkeys take a calf, and actually in this field, it was one of the most beautiful things to witness. The donkey nudging a calf all across this field and bringing it to the mama. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it. But that's how they are so protective of the calves as well.
Aw.
So when I had a cow-calf operation,
Yeah.
they were really important.
Yeah.
So we, with this size, these 7 and 9 month olds, there's not too much of an issue with the coyotes. So they're really more of a holdover from when I had those 168 mama cows. And talking about using regenerative means to fix a problem, the ryegrass is in fields that I don't normally plant the ryegrass in, is because we had see this smut grass?
Where?
The stalks coming out of the ground.
Oh, okay.
And that can be a problem in the fields down here. It's not all smut, but the smut grass, they really do not like to eat it. I imagine even in a mod grazing situation, it's so unpalatable to them. It's terrible, but it can also overtake a field. So what I'm doing is I'm planting ryegrass in a pretty heavy concentration in my 2 worst fields that have smut grass.
Okay.
Trying to drown it out. We'll grow the ryegrass really heavy in the spring,
Yeah.
and not let the smut grass get a hold of them. And I looked at a LSU study, pretty sure it was LSU that I read it, that they recommended that, and so I'm trying it
Yeah.
for the first time.
Okay.
So
cool.
I'm not going to go in there and spray it. Plus, spraying it's really, you have to use this horrible chemical, and
Yeah.
I would not do that. So, but that's an example of using nature against nature. I'm really interested to see if it works. And if it does, then I'll probably do the ryegrass in those fields for a few years in a row.
Okay.
And hopefully get that smut grass problem down.
Yeah. If you don't mind doing the math for me, if you're able to. So you've got about 430 acres,
Right.
25-acre paddocks. How many paddocks is that?
So probably around 15 or so. And what's neat about these feed areas too is I can move the cattle into these feed areas. Very easy to get them in here. And if I need to sort out somebody,
Yeah.
I can sort them out really easily in here.
Yeah.
These are mainly for what I call pre-market and market cows. But these two fields here are what I call the pre-market. They're just about ready to go to market, and they'll start, I'll coddle them more, which means they can always have hay, and we'll feed them a little extra of the alfalfa.
Is that for finish, or is that to get to know you?
To finish.
To finish.
Yeah, that's particularly in the winter. So,
Okay.
I mean, I'm in the summer months and a lot of the fall, I'm not even doing alfalfa.
It's just when the grass isn't as
Right.
growth.
I'll always make sure that you can see these are looking heavy too.
Yeah.
We basically have them on, they get hay about most, if you're not a market cow, you're getting the hay usually about 4 times a week. And I determine usually the amount of bales is, starting out is usually 2 bales, and then it goes up to about 3.
And then how many are you taking to the processor at a time?
4 to 6.
Okay.
4 on average, but sometimes we take 6.
Every couple weeks?
Every couple weeks. But you know, the whole farm is not pasture. I mean, we do have some wooded areas, and
So you're not necessarily putting cattle on the whole 430. You're just putting them in.
it's really close to it. But I would say there's some areas that are not really that navigable for you and the cattle. So we have that corded off. So I would say
Gotcha.
maybe 400.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. So what do you think is the biggest challenge to new farmers, growers, ranchers in the coming 20, 30 years when they're trying to be on some form of a regenerative model?
Shoot, and it's always the hardest thing is finances. It's figuring out a business model that'll work.
Yeah.
And it seems a shame. Land prices have gotten so expensive. It's hard for somebody to start. And then we have punitive measures in this government where the family farmer inherits and they're trying to tax that. How they're going to have to sell. I can only think that the reason for that is because they're trying to make it hard for us. I would love to give this to my kids, but if they have to pay a tax on it, how are they going to do that?
Yeah.
That is, I think, perhaps over-regulating. Punitive taxation is probably the hardest. If you're going to do it, you just have to have an absolute passion for it. You have to love what you're doing, because there's going to be days where it's super hard, where you get injured too. Like I said, even if you have a good job, it can still put you under if you're not doing it the right way. You know, I hope that I'll be doing this till the day I die.
Yeah.
I mean, I just love it.
That's awesome.
It is an honor and privilege to be able to grow food for people. And like I said, I really almost get more satisfaction out of it than even as a doctor.
Yeah.
These are the Pipkins.
The
They're
Pipkins.
like good friends of ours that basically are adopted grandparents to our kids.
Yeah.
All my kids, who all grew up on the farm, cattle farming, have known the Pipkins their entire lives basically, and or most of their lives. And the Pipkins are invaluable at the farmers markets. They have become celebrities down in Ocean Springs and are great representatives for Stonnington Farm beef. Do a lot of sales of our beef. Something really interesting about Dan, he used to be a driver for John F. Kennedy.
What?
Yes, he had one of the best driving records in the military. He was in the Air Force, and I'll let him tell you, but he's from Greene County, which is a couple counties over.
Okay.
They went interviewing all the people in Greene County to find out if Dan would be safe for the president, and he ended up being one of the last drivers for him
pretty neat story, I think.
Very cool. So how long have you guys been, you've been friends with the family forever, but how long have you been working for the farm?
About on and off 20 years.
20 years.
But
Wow.
since he's been in the beef, 12
We've
years,
been
I
about-
think.
So it was Katrina,
Yeah.
2005 is when we started.
Okay.
Right after Katrina.
So you guys are kind of like a face for Ocean Springs, but what else do you do for the farm?
Just everything that needs to be done when we're here.
Just kind of farm hands too.
When we're gone, they're the reason we can leave for a few
Oh.
days at a time or a week. They become the managers of the farm when we're gone and stay in our house and make sure everything is continuing as it needs to.
So it's
And-
kind of like a real family operation. You
That's
just
right.
technically aren't blood.
That's
No,
right. That's right. But
Cool.
we consider them like blood.
Yeah, right.
We go pick up meat at the processor and have her do orders.
The three of them know pretty much where all the beef is, and it's freezer beef and where it's going. That is something that I don't know.
Hey.
I don't really have anything to do with the separation of the freezer beef and where it's going. That's something that Katie
So
does.
you're on the live side and you
That's
guys are on the
right.
dead side.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
It's
People
awesome.
say, who do we talk to when we call in an order? And I say, you talk to Miss Katie. You give them a card and her name. I said, she ramrods this beef out for you. So any question you have on cutting or if they want to order, talk to her. So
She's running the books, and I
Yeah.
get in trouble every now and then for things that I've ordered that I guess I wasn't supposed to.
So do you guys have children? Are they a part of a farm or anything?
No, none of our family's all off.
Okay.
We got a daughter in Uganda and one in Virginia and a grandson in Liberia and one in California. So
Isn't that
Wow, that's awesome.
so we're all alone. So
yeah.
Okay.
I told Katie one time, it's hard for anybody to depend on people. It's in business. And I said, aren't you proud to know you got two dependable on call at any time?
Yeah.
Literally.
And really, it's handy for her. She's getting these dogs ready to take travel.
Yeah.
He took a picture over the barn somewhere around Christmas, and I saw it on Facebook, and I said, "Where did you take that? I practically live out there. Like, where's that?"
It was an angle that we had never done.
Yeah.
That's funny.
She's got some beautiful sunsets from this ranch here.
So it sounds like you guys really pour, your heart and soul that you can into this farm,
Of
and
course.
it really is
Yes,
like a
we
family
do.
operation at
Right.
the end of the day.
That's right.
And we-
I was raised that if a job is worth doing, it's worth doing right. So we do what we can to help them.
You're Katie.
Yes.
You do all of the, I'm sorry, Mike, I'm going to say it. You do the extra intensive work.
That's right.
There's pressure on both. You have to have the product, and then you've got to move the product.
Yeah.
And so, really, my responsibility is moving the product
Yeah.
and to set the correct price so that we can stay in business, but not too high, that we can't sell it. And
Yeah.
actually, recently we moved out of doing wholesale to doing just retail. There's
Yeah.
one small exception, a small general merchandise store in McHenry. We sell some limited meat to, but the rest is directly to the public.
Mike talked to us a little bit about that, but from a numbers perspective, what really made you change to go from wholesale to retail?
Roughly wholesale, we're losing about 25%, 20 to 25% per cut. It's sometimes more. When we sold to the grocery stores, they took everything we could sell at the farmer's market. They wanted the ribeyes, and I mean, they were good. We moved it, but
Yeah.
we're also small, so it was a solid day of driving around, delivering the food. We're too small. It was a full day every 2 weeks was delivering fresh meat to the grocery stores.
Yeah.
And then as I was handing it to them, I was thinking, I'm losing money on these ribeyes that I could sell for retail
Yeah.
in a few days at the farmer's market. And
Yeah.
also the big increase in the price of beef. I wanted to be able to make it affordable, and I thought, let the people buying retail get a break, instead of giving this big break to wholesale. And we're set up to sell retail. We have those nice big vans. They come to the farm, and we're small. We're not a huge outfit that's got to move.
Yeah. Mike has told me that you really focus on your customer interaction and that you don't like the cart button on your website because you want
Right.
to talk to people. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, for example, roast. People say we have a special this month on 4 ground beefs and a roast, and you get 10% off the list price. So people say, okay, I'll have the special with a roast. Well, we have eye of round, we have chuck, we have shoulder, we have rump, we have sirloin tip, we have tri-tip. And then they often don't know what kind of roast. So I say, well, how do you make it? And typically it's a crock pot or Instapot. And so I guide them in the right direction. I have, that's a big one. People who, want more fat, or people who want cuts with less fat, people that want to make beef jerky. There's a lot of guidance on what type of meat to get.
So you kind of help navigate them, hold their hand a little bit, make sure that they're
Right.
getting exactly what they need.
And I typically bring recipes to the farmer's market.
Ooh.
Yeah, just simple ones that I pulled out of the joy of cooking and modified maybe a little bit, but your basic simple recipes.
Yeah, very cool. So what's your background? Do you have a farming background, or
No.
how do you feel being into this world then?
I like it because it's a totally different life. It's tiring though, because like this morning, the alarm goes off at 5:30 on a Saturday, so you have to get up. But I enjoy it, and my background is I taught chemistry. I was a chemistry major, and then I got a doctorate in engineering, if you can believe it. But
Okay.
so I didn't like research, and my degree was research aimed, and I had no passion for it. And then I had kids, and brought up 3 kids, and then we moved here, and we slowly got into farming.
Okay. And you just enjoy being out here.
I do, and I enjoy the animals. You saw all the
Yeah,
dogs
you
as well.
so you have a rescue
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
Okay, very cool. I am just so thankful to have both of you guys show me around and just get to know you guys a little bit better. I think
Yeah.
what you guys are doing is really cool, and the fact that you went from wholesale to retail is even more unique because people tend to go the opposite way, that they want to get bigger to go wholesale. And you're like, no, I want to pull back onto those customers. So that's just
Yeah.
really cool, and your messaging comes out so clear, your passions come out so clear. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
It was so awesome to get
Yeah,
to know you guys.
it was an honor to be able to talk to you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.